if you just got your first $1,000 saved up, whether that's from a paycheck, a gift, tax refund, whatever, you're probably feeling like you need to do something smart with it. And for a lot of people in their 20s, something smart means opening up Robinhood, throwing it into some stock or ETF and calling it investing. I get the appeal, it feels productive. It feels like you're finally an adult who has their stuff together. But here's the thing, if that $1,000 is your entire financial cushion, putting it into the market is actually one of the riskiest moves you can make right now. Not because the market is bad, but because you have zero room for error. If your car breaks down, if you lose your job, if literally anything goes wrong, that money is now tied up, possibly down 10%, and you're forced to either sell at a loss or go into debt to cover the emergency. That's not building wealth. That's setting yourself up to get knocked over by the first gust of wind. Comment below, if you had $1,000 in your account right now, what would you actually do with it? Be honest. I want to see what people are thinking before they hear the rest of this. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly where your first $1,000 should go in the right order. So you're not just doing something with your money, you're actually building a foundation that everything else gets stacked on top of. Chapter 1, why $1? 000 in the stock market isn't the flex you think it is. The first thing I want to address is this idea that investing equals progress. The reality is investing $1,000 when you have no savings isn't progress, it's just moving money from one risky place to another. Here's the math. Let's say you put that $1,000 into an S&P 500 ETF. Historically, that thing averages something like 7-10% a year, which is great over a 10, 20, 30 year time frame. But in any given year, it can also drop 15-20% without much warning. If your transmission goes out 2 months later and costs $1,200 to fix, you don't have $1,200. You have $1,000 that might currently be worth $850 sitting in a brokerage account. Now what do? Most people in this situation either sell at a loss, locking in that loss permanently, or they put the repair on a credit card at 22-25% interest. Either way, that smart investing move just cost you money instead of making you money. This is where people mess up. They confuse doing something with money with doing the right thing with money. Investing feels exciting. Saving feels boring. But boring is what protects you. Chapter 2, the one account that should come before investing. So if investing isn't first, what is? It's a high yield savings account, and specifically it's the start of your emergency fund. Quick explanation for anyone who doesn't know, a high yield savings account, or HISA, is just a savings account that pays you a real interest rate, usually somewhere around 4 or 5% right now, compared to the basically 0.01% you get at a big traditional bank like Chase or Bank of America. Same FDIC protection, same safety, just way better return for doing absolutely nothing extra. Here's why this comes first. An emergency fund is money that exists specifically so that when life throws something at you and you don't have to touch your investments, you don't have to go into debt, and you don't have to panic. The general target most people talk about is 3 to 6 months of essential expenses. For a lot of people in their 20s, that's somewhere between $6,000 and $15,000 depending on your situation. I know that sounds like a lot compared to $1,000, but here's the thing, you don't need the full amount to get the benefit. Even having $1,000 set aside in a HISA, completely separate from your everyday spending account, changes your financial life. It means a flat tire, a vet bill, a security deposit, none of those things become a crisis anymore. So if I were in your shoes with $1,000 and no savings at all, that money goes straight into a HISA. Not because it's exciting, but because it's the thing that makes everything else you do afterward actually stick. Now, the second thing we need to talk about before we even get to investing is debt. Because if you have high interest debt sitting in the background, that changes this whole equation. Chapter 3, the debt math nobody wants to do. Okay, so let's talk about debt, because this is the chapter that changes everything depending on your situation. If you have credit card debt or any high interest debt, we're talking anything above roughly 8-10% interest, that debt has to be part of this conversation before you even think about investing. And here's why, with actual numbers. Let's say you've got $1,000 of credit card debt sitting at 24% APR, which is honestly on the lower end for credit cards these days. A lot of people are sitting at 27-29%. If you don't touch that debt, it's costing you about $240 a year just in interest, assuming the balance doesn't grow. Now compare that to investing $1,000 and hoping for a 7-10% return. You're looking at maybe $70, $100 a year if things go well. So the math is pretty brutal when you lay it out like this. Paying off that debt is basically a guaranteed 24% return, because that's the interest you're no longer paying. No investment is going to reliably beat that. Not crypto, not stocks, nothing realistic. This is where people mess up. They feel like paying off debt is not progress, progress because the number in their bank account isn't growing. But the reality is eliminating a 24% guaranteed loss is way better than chasing an 8% maybe gain. Now, I want to be clear about something: not all debt is the same. If you've got federal student loans sitting at 4 or 5% or a car loan around 6%, that's a different category. Those interest rates are low enough that you don't need to panic pay them off before doing anything else. The debt I'm talking about is the high interest stuff: credit cards, personal loans, anything north of that 8-10% range. That's the debt that actively works against you every single month it exists. So here's the question you need to ask yourself honestly: do you have any of that high interest debt right now? Because if you do, that changes where your $1,000 goes. And if you don't, you're actually in a really good spot. And we can move on to the fun part. Chapter 4, where the $1,000 actually goes. All right, let's put this all together. Here's how I'd actually break down that $1,000 step by step depending on your situation. Scenario A: you have high interest debt, cards, personal loans above 8-10%. If this is you, here's what I'd do. Take that $1,000 and split it roughly like this. $500 goes toward knocking down that high interest debt, and $500 goes into a high yield savings account as the very start of your emergency cushion. Why split it instead of going all in on debt? Because if you put all $1,000 toward debt and then your car breaks down next week, you're right back on that credit card. And now you're worse off than when you started. Having even a small buffer, even just $500, means a small emergency doesn't immediately undo your progress. From there, every dollar after this $1,000 goes almost entirely toward that high interest debt until it's gone. Once it's gone, you redirect that same monthly payment amount into your emergency fund until you hit that 3-6 month target. Scenario B: you have no high interest debt if you're debt free, or your only debt is low interest stuff like student loans or a car payment. Then the full $1,000 goes into a high yield savings account as the start of your emergency fund. You don't need to overcomplicate this. You're not splitting it. You're not trying to be clever. You're just building that cushion. Keep adding to it from future paychecks until you hit that 3-6 month number we talked about earlier. What happens after the emergency fund is built? Once you've got that 3-6 months of expenses sitting in your HISA, that's when investing becomes the priority. At that point, the order I'd follow is: first, get your full employer 401k match if you have one, because that's free money. Literally an instant 50-100% return depending on your employer's match structure. Then a Roth IRA where your contributions grow completely tax-free as long as you follow the withdrawal rules. Then, if you've got money left over, a regular brokerage account for additional investing, but none of that matters yet if you're working with your first $1,000. Right now, your job is just emergency fund first, high interest debt second, in whatever order makes sense for your specific numbers. Keep it simple. Don't let anyone make you feel behind for putting $1,000 into a savings account instead of the stock market. This is the move that protects everything you build after this.